Ladies and gents, welcome to UX, and this is why the US isn't scared of Russia's S-400. Much all sandboxx. Yeah, this is like older video, 2+ years old, but this is relative because of the recent, I don't want to say war, but recent conflict between India and Pakistan, because we didn't get to war, right? That's not war. Because of the recent conflict between Pakistan and India, S-400 was properly tested. Now, uh, I'm guessing this is against this is against F-35 or something, like how F-35 is not scared and shit like that. Uh, Obviously, with S-400 is kind of redeemed, or I don't know what I mean by redeemed. But yeah, with the Russian systems are getting under attack all the time, like, oh, they don't work. S-400 worked flawlessly in India. Now, does that mean S-400 is that good? I mean, S-400 is counted as one of the best air defenses on the planet because of its all-rounder. US doesn't have counterpart to S-400. US have multiple, right? There is THAAD, TSAAD. There's specific things like drone and whatever, like, like smaller version. Then there is Patriot, ballistic and things. There's Aegis. All three combined together does the job that S-400 does. But obviously, you would think that S-400 is an all-rounder, so you won't have a level of accuracy that those combined three have. Sure, maybe that's the case. But then again, S-400's all data that is out there shows that it has insane accuracy, right? But then again, people are always like, oh, maybe that's just inflated numbers. Russia is just lying, this and that. But in India, when Pakistan attacked, most of the 90 plus 99%, who knows, most of those things were intercepted. And obviously, people say like S-400 did that. But you need to remember that India doesn't have just S-400. India has its own domestic defenses as well. 3-4 of them. 2-3 of them at least. Which is like overkill in a way when you think about it. Even I didn't know that. Like when I realized, what the fuck? I didn't even know my country was doing that. So there is Akash system, which in itself is, like powerful. They did the testing and it had a higher accuracy before, and like recent time, it just makes sense, right? So S-400 was working. Akash system was working. There's also Prithvi system. Prithvi implying Earth. Prithvi system is working, but Prithvi, I think, is mostly for ICBMs. But yeah, there is more detail behind it. Like 2-3, and there's also French and Indian combined system. I forgot the name of that. 2-3 systems are working in Indian defenses. No fucking wonder that no Pakistani missile went through. It's not just one thing. And we have S-400. So is S-400 that good? Or did S-400 just like tackle like drones and like cruise missiles? But when it comes to ballistics, Akash system was working. Who knows? Indian military didn't give detail about that. But S-400 got all the news, all the glory. Like S-400 did this. S-400 is a prime thing, and it kind of is. So we don't know about how good S-400 is, but it's kind of redeemed if you really think about it. But we'll see in details by number how it's working by sandboxx. So let's waste one.
Russia's S-400 Triumph is widely touted as one of, if not the most capable air defense system in the world. With the ability to leverage a variety of missiles to engage different air threats at ranges up to 250 miles, the S-400 has widely touted counter-stealth capabilities.
That is what 400 is, 400 kilometers. S-300 means 300 kilometers, but that's not all the thing that is. It's not just about the range. Is that detecting capabilities is much better of S-400 than of S-300. So yeah, even if you hate, and most of my viewers hate Russian things, I'm guessing, because it's Western viewers. But even if that's the case, like you really need to not everything Russia is going to do is going to be bad. There has to be something they're good at. Like S-400 is one of those things. I mean, come on.
Abilities, and it's gained a reputation as one of the few systems capable of countering America's air dominance approach to warfare. But is that true? Let's dive into the S-400 and what it's really capable of. I'm Alex Hollings, and this is Air Power.
And after Houthis targeted at F-35, I won't be surprised if S-400 would be a threat against F-35. Because in my mind, it's that thing, like tank level thing now. How much stealth really works. Like, even the simplest system can target like advanced things. At that point, like, what do? It's like a tank-like thing, right? A drone can take out a tank. So maybe good enough system is enough to even like target 5th generation planes. Like, what do you do at that point? I guess there are multiple things behind it, like jammers and things that should work. I don't know.
Among the heated debates that you can find on social media and in forums about aviation, the question of how well the S-400 can defend against America's stealth fighters comes up pretty often. Depending on which side of the Iron Curtain your loyalties lie, you may either see the S-400 as the kryptonite to America's stealth-focused air dominance approach to warfare, or just another overhyped piece of Russian equipment benefiting from a great deal of media manipulation. And to be clear, it's not easy to determine which it is. Russia has been intentionally opaque about the S-400's testing history, and in the few situations where the S-400 has found itself in real combat, its performance has prompted more questions than answers. So I set out to get to the bottom of this, and not just by going over publicly accessible media reporting about the S-400's development and its use in combat, but also peer-reviewed assessments from experts in a variety of nations, so I could get as broad a perspective as I could into how effective this system really is. And in my research, I came to two seemingly counterintuitive conclusions. The first is that the S-400 isn't nearly as capable as it's commonly perceived to be, but the second is that it is nonetheless one of the most advanced and capable air defense systems in use in the world today.
See, this is why I love sandboxx. He's not just gonna point blank, oh, when he speaks, you can see like, oh, I'm a Western, I don't like Russian things. Every time he makes a point, it's like he doesn't shit on something if it doesn't, if it doesn't need it. He's not just gonna point blank gonna have biased. That's the one thing I've noticed about sandboxx very recently. After watching a lot of channels that I thought was unbiased, turned out to be not much unbiased. Sandboxx is really unbiased, man. Even with the India-Pakistan coverage and everything, right? He didn't say like, oh, India shit or Pakistan shit. It's just like, okay, let's wait around. All the armchair people, this and that, like you're gonna predict things, let's wait out. So I really like sandboxx in that way. And even here, he could just say, oh, S-400 sucks. No, it's like, it's still one of the best systems in the world, and it kind of is. Recent thing just showed that. Now, obviously, like I said, like, is it all S-400? Is it Akash system working? Indian military didn't give much of details there.
Hey. Now, I know those seem like opposing views, but the complexity of the air defense enterprise is just so understated in media and popular discussion that it really lends itself to this sort of misunderstanding. The emergence of hypersonic missiles in recent years has really further exacerbated this unrealistic expectation that people have for modern air defenses. These fast-moving and maneuverable missiles are often touted as important specifically because they can defeat modern air defense systems. And that emphasis on their value as a means of overcoming air defense systems just sort of suggests that subsonic and even supersonic missiles can't. But that's not true. Intercepting any missile is a very difficult proposition that no air defense system in the world can manage with 100% efficacy all the time. Now, as is often the case, my full-length analysis into the S-400 is just too long to fit all in one video, but you can find it on sandboxxnews.com. So if after you watch this, you want to dive a bit further into the...
Yeah, so that is so true. Like, nobody has 100% accuracy, right? So that's kind of fucked up, because even with the recent Pakistan attack, like all the attack before that, with the drones and cruise missile, India managed to intercept almost all of that. What does that mean, almost all of that? No target was hit. Some of them probably went through and hit a ground or something, or field or something, but most were intercepted because India has 3 separate systems. It's just by numbers. So it doesn't rely on one system to be completely accurate. People say like, that feels unrealistic, like that can't happen. Yeah, but India doesn't have one system. Pakistan only has one system, Chinese air defense, and they are not even that number. India has many homegrown system and S-400s. I mean, come on. Right, at that point, like, come on. And it's S-400 has much advantage against Pakistan because 400 kilometers. So system would immediately detect as soon as something gets fired and tracks it. It's much easier to strike down after that, right? Countries like Russia and US have issues because they are big landmass countries. They can't detect incoming missile from way long distance, ICBMs and things. But when you're launching ballistic missile from inside 400 kilometer diameters, S-400 would immediately detect as soon as you launch it, right? So that's one of the reasons. And still in the latest attack, like one or two missiles or drones went through and hit a home in Jammu and like killed a lot of people. So it's not like all were intercepted. It's like 95+% all intercepted, which is impressive for India if you think about it.
The nitty-gritty details, I definitely recommend you check it out. There will be a link in the description below. But now let's get down to business. Development of the S-400 probably began in the 1980s, but the effort wasn't revealed to the public until 1993, which you may note was 2 years after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Like many former Soviet programs that saw continued life under the newly formed Russian Federation, budgetary constraints dictated a great deal of the S-400's development and makeup. About 70 to 80% of its hardware is actually borrowed directly from the S-300 that actually began development all the way back in the late 60s. The primary changes between the S-300 and the more modern S-400 came in the form of updated and refined radar systems, improved software, and the incorporation of new missile types to offer more flexibility in target intercepts and an increased range. Another very important...
That's the main thing though. It's like saying most of the engines this Range Rover uses are Rover engines from like 50s or something. Or like most of GM engines were Rover engines because a GM executive went to Britain and just, oh, I like this, and took a Rover engine. That's not really full truth, is it? Like core is that, sure.
An aspect of the S-400 system are its electronic warfare countermeasures, including radio frequency hopping to limit the effectiveness of jamming and agile beam steering for improved target acquisition and tracking. But the S-400's counter-stealth claims come largely thanks to the inclusion of Russia's Nebo-M radar, which combines 3 different arrays that broadcast on different frequency bands to detect, track, and even target low observable aircraft, like America's 5th-generation fighters. This system does so by leveraging a largely misunderstood attribute of stealth fighter design, their inherent detectability against low-frequency radar bands. Now, we discussed this at length a few weeks ago, so I won't go too deep into the details, but modern stealth fighters are designed to delay or prevent detection against higher frequency radar arrays broadcasting in parts of the S, C, X, and KU bands, because these are the systems that are capable of providing what we call a weapons-grade lock. In other words, these are the arrays that can guide a missile to a target. Lower frequency arrays, leveraging the L or S bands, or even lower ones in the VHF bands, aren't capable of guiding weapons with this sort of accuracy, but they are capable of spotting stealth fighters in the sky. As a result, many nations have developed early warning radar systems that leverage low-frequency bands to notify them of the approach of stealth fighters. But the thing most people don't realize about stealth fighters is that knowing it's there isn't the challenge. Being able to actually target it and shoot it down is.
See, but the Houthi targeting makes me think that this is an old news. They probably updated all these systems so they can like target stealth planes now. Because how the fuck otherwise Houthis targeted F-35 in the first place, right? US needs to give out more detail about like how that, because somebody just dropped the bomb like, oh, by the way, so someone in US like, by the way, F-35 was targeted by Houthis. It's like, man, come on now, give details, because you're like doing more damage to your country than anyone else. At this time, you need to give more detail like how was it targeted, right? So I think, S-400 that India uses and everything like kind of is updated by now, S-400 everywhere as well. Because people need to realize that, yeah, India has S-400, but India also tunes. It's not the same S-400. That's not how military equipment works. Everybody's tuning their own thing. There's a reason why F-35 that Israel have are different than other F-35s in a lot of ways. They have their own code and things. So S-400 that India has, India tunes itself. And recent, press conference, Indian military themselves said, like recent conflict with Pakistan, India used AI to manage like where to put what, how to do defense, and quoted the AI was one of the main reason why we stopped a lot of incoming missiles and how targeting was precise. If that's the case, India is literally the first country to ever use AI in a combat. But then again, there's not many combat large countries are doing right now. India is top 5 power, and I guess besides Russia, it's the only country that did any war related things at that scale. But yeah, India used AI. So, technology is moving. So it's not the same equipment, right? S-400 might be updated. S-400 might be different variant now.
Russia's Nebo-M system incorporates 3 different radar arrays to try to get around this problem. Two of them are low-frequency arrays, the Nebo SVU in the VHF band and the Protivnik G in the L band, both of which can detect the presence of stealth fighters as they approach, but neither of which can actually target them. And that's where the Nebo M earns its pay, because it networks these two low-frequency arrays with Russia's Gamma S1 high-frequency array that broadcasts in the S and X bands that are capable of providing a target-grade lock. So, by tracking a stealth fighter with the low-frequency bands until it is close enough to actually target with a high-frequency band, the Nebo M system offers a pretty effective means of keeping tabs on and eventually even shooting down stealth fighters. And this is where discussion about radar cross-sections, or RCS, become important. And technically speaking, a radar cross-section is the ratio of backscatter power.
See, this is why I'm like, yeah, again, like all the time I'm talking about S-400 in India, like what you talking about, like India, US is not going to war. I'm not talking about F-35. It's just a topic here, sandboxx. I'm talking about Chinese stealth plane. Yes, F-35 has great radar cross-section. Chinese don't, right? So people are the, oh, J-10C, this and that, like, yeah, okay, try it against S-400 and see what happens, right? So, yeah, with enough system India has, if shit goes, even, shit hits the fan in the future, and Pakistan decide to use whatever 10-15 J-10C they have, yeah, most of them are going to get shot through, right? And people are like, oh, J-10C won against Rafale. India and Pakistan didn't go to war. India did a surgical strike, and Pakistan just decided to shoot back. Maybe India's hands were tied, right? You don't know. Unless a proper war breaks out where both sides try to attack each other, you can't know if Rafale is weak compared to J-10C.
Power to the power density that's received by the target, but for our purposes, you can think of a radar cross-section as the size of an aircraft's consistent radar return. But before we go further, I want to give you what's becoming my standard RCS disclaimer, which is that radar cross-sections are not widely divulged.
Look at how awesome it is, just the shape of things. It feels like Batmobile or some shit. I love the shape of this plane, man. All the planes are good. I'm not saying other planes are not good like F-18, F-16, but they look like plane. This is because of stealth reason. It's so seamless. Look at how awesome it looks.
By governments and are incredibly difficult to calculate. So you should take any discussion about RCS, including discussion from me, with a grain of salt. America's F-35 is said to boast a radar cross-section of about 0.0015 square meters, or around the size of a golf ball, while the even stealthier F-22's RCS is more like 0.0001 square meters, or about the size of a marble.
Damn.
These both represent a huge improvement over America's...
All of this. F-22 has better stealth cross radar sections. So F-22 is just badass. Yes, Houthi targeted F-35, but can they do... I mean, US needs to use F-22 more, man. You're retiring it now. You bring in F-47, and I have a feeling the F-22 is going to be like badass. You should use that more, rather than just using F-35.
First stealth aircraft, the F-117 Nighthawk, which had a radar cross-section commonly accepted to be around 0.003 square meters. Small as these are, you may note, small isn't invisible. And in practical application, stealth isn't about preventing detection altogether, but rather about delaying it for long enough for the fighter to either strike first or escape a potential threat. The smaller your radar return, the closer your aircraft needs to be to the array in order to be effectively targeted. Now, according to a peer-reviewed assessment by Hellenic Air Force Colonel and electronics engineer Konstantinos Zidikis, published by the Journal of Computations and Modeling back in 2014, the Nebo M's low-frequency radar arrays can detect the F-117 Nighthawk at a range of 350 kilometers, or about 217 miles, in an environment free of electronic warfare, and potentially as far as 72 kilometers, or 45 miles, while under heavy jamming. This detection range is the basis for so many S-400 counter-stealth claims, but it fails to acknowledge the difference between detecting a stealth fighter and actually targeting one. And it's further important to note that these detection ranges are based on the F-117, which has a radar...
Yeah, but again, if you can detect it that way, you can, kind of like target general area with multiple missiles. With, missile doesn't have to hit the plane, it just have to explode in a general area with high enough explosive. That's how S-400 and systems like that works. They don't directly attack the target. They come close enough and then explode, so ensuring that target is destroyed. So if you can detect it somewhat all the way at 350 kilometers away, which is very close to its range, that's good. So you can launch multiple missiles around it.
Our cross-section that's about 30 times bigger than the F-22s and at least twice the size of the F-35s. As a result, both detection and targeting ranges for these more modern fighters would be reduced dramatically from those figures. Based on assessments, the S-400 can target the F-35, but almost certainly not until it flies within 20 miles of the system. As a result, in a one-on-one fight between America's F-35A, carrying the forthcoming AAR-GM-ER extended range anti-radiation missile, which has a range of better than 60 miles, the F-35 is almost always going to come out on top. But that's also a bit misleading, because the S-400's real strength can only be found when incorporated into a larger integrated air defense system that would really complicate matters for an F-35 trying to take it out. But although Russian forces would certainly use the S-400 as
S-400 isn't just one truck, right? S-400 is 13 truck or 16, I don't know, something like that, 13 or 16 different trucks with multiple radars, multiple launchers, and multiple command systems. And that becomes a one squadron. So when they say India has 3 S-400, that's not just 3 trucks, that's 3 squadrons. Each squadron having like 15, 16 trucks in it, spread around to detect shit.
As a part of such an integrated air defense system, the third-party nations who purchase these platforms often don't, which means that really is how such a fight might play out if an F-35 were pitted against an S-400 operated by a third-party nation. Like all air defense systems, the S-400's field of view is limited by the horizon when not networked with other assets, particularly airborne ones like AWACS, or tethered balloons called aerostats. And that's where Russia's modern warfare doctrine can really stand in their way. Russia's approach to warfare, as we've seen over the past 5 months of conflict in Ukraine, does not prioritize securing air dominance. And that may be a direct result of NATO's massive air power capabilities. Russia understands.
See, this is one of the things why India didn't bought a lot of Russian things, planes and things. Because Russia's doctrine is defense, so S-400 is great, India took that. When it comes to buying plane, India took Rafale planes from France, not from Russia, right? People think like India just have Russian weapons. No, India's 30% of Indian weapons are Russian. And that's because India had only Russian weapons long before. So it's kind of like overwhelming because of that. Others are from Europe, and most of them are from like indigenous, like made in India. And this is not just like, oh, India just decided one day to put factories. No, this is joint ventures from France and other countries. And that is called indigenous. So it's not just India just started from scratch and those equipment suck. These are European and, like even American technology in a lot of places. Even sometimes the US and India collaborates to make something, and that's called indigenous system.
That it may not be able to gain or maintain air superiority in the event of a large-scale conflict. So rather than trying to win that losing battle, Russian doctrine has just shifted to accept the idea that it may not be able to control all of the airspace that it's fighting in. I have a full-length analysis into how Russia's warfare doctrine is playing out in Ukraine that you can read on Sandboxx News. I'll include a link below. But to cut to the point, what this ultimately means is that the airspace over a conflict with Russia would remain contested at best for them, and at worst would be largely dominated by American or Allied forces. And as you can probably imagine, when you don't have total control over your airspace, operating things like AWACS or tethered balloons to extend your radar reach just wouldn't be very easy to pull off. And that creates an opportunity for very specific kinds of attacks. I'm going to quote a Rand Corporation analysis by Peter Wilson and John Pericini about this specific set of circumstances. Without over-the-horizon sensors, the S-400 and other powerful HIMARS systems are vulnerable to a low-altitude attack by cruise missiles, which in large numbers can overwhelm an air defense system. And that line of sight...
See, that's the thing. Another thing that doesn't apply to India, because like I said, India has its own indigenous system, over-the-horizon detection and multi-more satellite detection, Prithvi system that, like patrols space. India recently shot down a satellite just to so it can shoot down ICBMs from space. Prithvi system, Akash system. So India has its own system with S-400. So S-400 doesn't need to do all those things. S-400 can just like detect, cruise missile, drones, and maybe some ballistic close range missiles. Everything else, India's other system can take over, right? Prithvi system, pretty sure, is made with a joint venture with a few European countries like France and others, right? Akash system is indigenously made. It's like version 5 or something. The India didn't just make it. It's like they've been making that for a long enough time now. It's version 5 or something. They're making version, I don't know, some newer version of Prithvi system, which is like even more advanced. Joint venture with multiple other countries, right? So yeah, S-400 alone isn't great. But if you have something like multiple indigenous systems, satellite detection, over the horizon detection that India has, I mean, come on, like countries like Pakistan don't have a chance. I mean, really? It's all about logistics, have people told me in the past when it comes to America. And yeah, it's true. It's all about logistics. Like how many shit you have. If you have too many shit and too many technologies, like, yeah, it's not much of fight, is it? There's not much of fight between India and Pakistan this way.
Problem can be made significantly worse by geography. If you're fighting in a mountainous area, it gets even harder to detect those low-flying threats. Now, a Russian S-400 battalion usually consists of 8 missile launch platforms, each of which is armed with 4 missiles. Now, regardless of the missile types, that means that at best, an S-400 battalion can intercept 32 targets before it runs out of interceptors to fire. With an outside range of 400 kilometers or 250 miles, that means that even cargo aircraft like America's C-130 or C-17 could eventually become very effective S-400 hunters by using programs like Rapid Dragon to deploy a high volume of low observable cruise missiles from distances greater than 600 miles. Though, to be clear, in order to do this, you'd need to have good targeting data for those.
More than that, these are cruise missiles. So if you see a lot of incoming missiles like that, you would develop interceptors and many other systems to take them out. You won't just rely on S-400.
S-400 systems, which may be fairly easy to come by via an F-35 flying outside the S-400's 20-mile targeting envelope. In an assessment of the S-400 penned by the Risk Assistance Network and Exchange that was actually arguing in favor of the S-400 platform, they still had to make this concession. Against a low-flying cruise missile, an S-400 will more likely find success at a distance in the tens of kilometers, rather than in the hundreds. Ultimately, an isolated S-400 battery, or even battalion, will therefore be vulnerable to a saturation standoff attack, and may even be destroyed without destroying a single enemy aircraft. And there's real-world data to back up that assertion. In April of 2017, American and Allied forces launched cruise missile strikes against Syrian targets in proximity to Russian S-400 systems that were online. And despite Russia's claims of defending airspace at 400-kilometer ranges, they failed to intercept any of these cruise missiles before they could find their target just 175 kilometers away. And Russian S-300 systems that leverage the same Nebo-M radar arrays have consistently failed to prevent attacks from small drones, like Turkey's Bayraktar TB2 and Israeli cruise missiles in places like Syria, and more recently, in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. There's a great assessment of the failures of a variety of Russian air defense systems in
Yeah, in India intercepted all drones attacks, but then again, like I said, it's not clear that they were S-400 system or they were indigenous Akash system that were like working there. So that's not clear. A lot of launching would make me think it's probably Akash system, because S-400 has like this high velocity missile that you can just tell it if it's an S-400 system. So yeah, India used many systems, so it's not clear if it was S-400 or not. So it's not much you can draw from recent conflict. Like, is S-400 working in all scenarios? But the point is, S-400 is working fine. India knew how to utilize that. If you have a military that is competent and knows, strength and weaknesses of your system, overall, it's really powerful.
That conflict, penned by Shahza Arif, a researcher for the Pakistani Air Force's Center for Aerospace and Security Studies, that was published in January of this year, that I highly recommend reading. It is great stuff. And while the general fog of war makes it tough to know which air defenses are being used where in the fight for Ukraine, You can see clearly that these sorts of low-altitude, low-speed drone attacks have still been successful against Russian forces there as well. So, does all this really mean that Russia's S-400 isn't actually any good? Well, no. The fact of the matter is, the S-400 and its recently deployed successor, the S-500, are probably very capable air defense systems. They just are limited by the physical, financial, and geographical constraints of their operational environments and of the
See, even sandboxx says like these are really good, but it's like money issues, incompetent chain of command and incompetent chain of supply causes issues, right? Same thing applies to T-14. I haven't seen a single person who even hates Russia say the T-14 sucks. It's the only thing like, oh, T-14s are just not there. So yeah, and this kind of collaborates with the recent conflict with India and Pakistan, where S-400 works great. Because Indian military didn't say like, oh, then again, why would they say it? So it's not really clear, but yeah, S-400 probably worked great. It's really hard to pinpoint which system worked great if you have multiple systems, but yeah.
the nations that they serve. Like all weapon systems, their real value can only be found when properly integrated into a larger defense apparatus based on a functional and effective combat doctrine. The S-400 is almost certainly not the stealth-defeating air defense force field that it's often made out to be, but it is a very effective system with scalable capabilities through networked support. Should America be scared of the big bad S-400? Probably not. With systems like the F-35,
I would say probably yes, because that's not how anything works. You're gonna be scared of everything, so you're gonna jam it. You're gonna take it out with radiation missiles and everything before trying anything else. I said that during the recent conflict with India and Pakistan, like Rafales were shot down, yeah, but they didn't launch anti-radar systems, anti-radiation systems, right? They didn't do a lot of jamming and things. They just went after certain targets that they had. They were not preparing to fight Pakistan itself before Pakistan just intensified. So war is like much more detailed, much more nuanced. It's not 1v1 type of shit. So yeah, yes, they're not gonna take chance against S-400. Maybe it might target it. They're gonna do many things before it to overwhelm the system, take it out before doing anything.
and the F-22 in service, and platforms like the B-21, NGAD, and F/A-XX in active development, Uncle Sam shouldn't be shaking in his boots over the system. But make no mistake about it, underestimating the S-400 in combat could prove a costly mistake no matter what you're flying. And it just goes to show how important mission planning really is for all stealth operations. Real quick, before I go, I want to take a quick second to shout out my buddy Joe Wolf and his son Chris.
So you should never underestimate some system, because anything, like I said, Houthi targeted F-35. After that, you should not, anything can be an X factor, depending on the scenario, geography, and condition. Even the simplest system could target something as advanced as F-35. So you need to take everything as precaution. But yeah. So yeah, with a competent people, a tool is great, right? If you're playing Call of Duty, of course you have an assault rifle, but you also have a pistol. In the right time, you would use that pistol and it's effective. That's how systems work. With a competent military, and a system like S-400 is really important, right? This is why India procured S-400 in past 2-3 years. It really helped out in the recent conflict, right? So Indian militaries kind of have this future vision, what to do, where the geopolitics is going, which threats are rising, right? Military is constantly working there. If you're a competent military, they're doing this constantly. Right, well, that was why the US isn't scared of Russia S-400. Yeah, US too much logistics. There's nothing to be afraid of when it comes to USA. You can do a lot of shit. Even if you F-35 gets shot down, that's nothing. That's not too much for you anyway. So in war, that doesn't really matter. Alright, well, I guess I'll see you next time.